Hey everyone, welcome back. In the last episode, I believe we ended off where I was talking about my experience and how my sickness was during my brother's wedding. I might have mentioned last time what we'll be talking about in this episode, or where we'll be starting off. We'll be starting off talking about when POTS, after my diagnosis, after I kind of started to realize my symptoms, what I'll have to do, when it kind of started to hit for me. And what I mean by that is when I started to really get down, where I really started to feel this overwhelming sadness about the topic. So it's kind of hard to start on such a damper, honestly. It's hard to start on such a rough note, but where I left off kind of segued into having POTS is really hard, and I kind of just wanted to talk about that. So this was when I started to really lock in and understand, I guess, the reality of it's not just the kind of hard where you have a bad day and then bounce right back. It's the kind of hard that changes everything, your body, your energy, your plans, and your relationships. And honestly, even how you see yourself. People think it just means you get dizzy sometimes, but they really don't see the reality of the racing heart and the weakness and the breathlessness of simply walking across a room. The constant planning and adjusting just to do things other people would never have to think about twice. POTS just touches all of your life. It wraps itself around it as a whole, and it affects your dance. You can't spin endlessly and push your body like before without wondering if you're going to pass out in front of everyone, which happened often. It affects your home life. Some days you feel like you're a burden because you need help doing the simple things, or because you are too exhausted to keep up. It affects how others view you. Some think you're exaggerating. Some think you're dramatic. Some disappear because chronic illness makes them uncomfortable. And maybe the hardest part, it affects how you view yourself. You start to question your worth. When you can't do something you used to, you wonder if you're still strong or still capable. The one I kept talking about, my friend, the one with POTS, she understands exactly what I mean when I say life is exhausting. When you're chronically ill, you don't just fight physically with your physical symptoms. You fight discouragement, and you fight fear. You fight loneliness, and that quiet voice that sometimes whispers, "Why try? What's the point?" But this is where faith comes in. Not the pretty or easy. I mean the gritty, the tear-streaked wrestling with God kind of faith. The kind of faith where you pray even when you don't understand. The kind of faith that hangs on when your body is weak and your spirit refuses to quit. The kind of faith that says, before POTS, I never realized how fast I was living. Always going, always doing, always moving on to the next thing, from dance to school to friends to church. I didn't know what it meant to rest. I really didn't slow down, and when I thought I was slowing down, I thought it meant falling behind. But chronic illness has a way of forcing you to slow down whether you're ready or not. Suddenly, I found myself spending more time laying on the floor than living on my feet. More time saying, "I can't today," than normally saying, "I'll be there." More time alone with my thoughts than surrounded by people. I hated it, and sometimes I still do. The stillness felt like a punishment. I remember laying in bed thinking, "God, why would you let my body fail me like this?" Why would you give me passions like dance just to take them away? Why would you isolate me like this? And I didn't hear a loud answer, but when life stopped moving, I finally noticed I used to rush past. I learned who my real friends were. I learned my value isn't based on how much I can do. Like, I like to be it, I can do it all type of person. So I struggle with this. So I learned that being strong doesn't always mean pushing harder. Sometimes it means accepting help. I learned that God doesn't leave you when life hurts. He actually comes closer. Pots forced me into stillness, but God met me there. I didn't realize it then, and sometimes I still don't, but He was reshaping my heart, teaching me to depend on Him, not my health, not my plans, not my own strength. And I'm still trying to accept that illness does not mean God has abandoned me. Sometimes it means He's beginning something deeper. Nobody prepares you for the emotional side of chronic illness. Doctors hand you medical terms and medications, maybe a treatment plan, but they don't tell you how to hold yourself together when life changes you overnight. They don't tell you how to handle the grief of losing your old self. There's a kind of grief that comes with chronic illness, grieving the life you used to have, the energy you used to wake up with, the simple freedom of not thinking about your body every second of every day. I remember one of my lowest moments. It wasn't a hospital visit or a scary symptom. It was a normal day. I woke up dizzy before even standing up. My heart was pounding. My whole body felt heavy, like someone had tied weights to my arms and legs. I had plans that day: school, dance, and church. But instead, I ended up on the floor of my bathroom crying because I couldn't even stand long enough to brush my teeth. That day didn't hurt because of the pain, even though it did. It hurt because of the loss. I felt trapped inside my body that I couldn't even cooperate with. My dreams felt useless. I felt useless and weak and left behind. And the worst part, I started to believe the lie that I was a burden to people around me. The emotional battle with chronic illness isn't always dramatic. It's silent, and it shows up in the guilt and the comparison, and as well as the frustration and that constant feeling of being misunderstood. I've heard people say you don't look sick, as if visible pain is the only real kind. They see you smile for 10 minutes and assume life is good again, but they never see the crash afterwards. And hope? Hope is beautiful, but sometimes it feels heavy when you're holding on to it by a singular thread. But here's what I'm learning: hope isn't about feeling okay, it's about believing God is still working, even when nothing makes sense yet. And sometimes hope sounds like, I don't understand this, but I just won't give up. So, trusting in God in the middle is very hard. When you grow up hearing about faith, you hear about stories and miracles. You know, God parting the sea, healing the blind, raising the dead. You hear testimonies of people getting instant healing, sudden breakthroughs, prayers answered right on time. And don't get me wrong, I believe God does miracles like that to this day. He absolutely can heal in the moment. But what about when he doesn't? Or at least not yet. What about the middle of the story? The part where you're still sick and struggling, where you're still waiting for the breakthrough. Faith becomes a lot more real and a lot more raw when you have to trust God without knowing how the story ends. For a long time, I thought trusting God meant pretending everything was okay. Smiling, saying, God's got this, even when I was breaking inside. But I've learned something honestly freeing. Faith isn't about pretending that you're not hurting. Faith is choosing to trust God when you're hurting. There's a verse that hit me differently once I got sick. It's from Proverbs 3, verse 5. It says, Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not depend on your own understanding. I used to think that verse was just about making decisions. Trust God about college, relationships, future plans. But when your health falls apart, those words get real. Do not depend on your own understanding. That's hard, even when nothing makes sense. I don't understand why some of us have to suffer. I don't understand why healing sometimes takes years. I don't understand why God doesn't just fix it all right now. But faith is choosing to trust Him, not because I understand, not because I know Him, but because His character doesn't change, even when my circumstances do. Because I've seen Him show up in my weakness, because He holds my future when I can barely hold myself. We always want the ending of the story, but God wants our trust in the middle. I'm still preaching that to myself daily. There's nights where I prayed and I didn't feel anything. Days where I opened up my Bible not because I was overflowing with faith, but because I was desperate. Desperate for something to hold on to. Desperate for proof that God still saw me. Desperate. And desperate to believe that there was a purpose in the plan. I didn't go looking for perfect verses that made everything better. I went looking for survival words that kept my heart from giving up. These are some scriptures that held me when I couldn't hold myself, like 2 Corinthians 12:9 or Psalms 34, verse 18. I used to think that God only came close when I was strong and faithful and praising, but I found Him closer in the broken moments than I ever did when I was quote unquote perfect. Another verse is Isaiah 43:2 and also Psalm 56:8. God doesn't ignore pain, He counts it, He sees it, He holds it. Not one tear is wasted. These verses didn't magically take away my illness. They still don't. They didn't erase my questions, but they are teaching me to anchor myself. They remind me that even when life hurts, God is still good, present, and still working. Sometimes faith isn't loud. Sometimes faith is whispering scriptures to yourself at 2 a.m. because you refuse to let hopelessness win. Hope sounds beautiful until you have to fight for it. There are days when I don't feel hopeful at all. Days when I wake up already exhausted. Days where my heart feels like it's racing out of my chest for no reason. Days where my legs give out. Or when I feel like nothing ever will change. Days when I've begged God, why won't you heal me? It gets dark sometimes. People don't talk about that part of faith. No one wants to admit that they've sat in the bathroom floor, breaking down, and wondered if God even heard them anymore. But that's real, and that was me, still is. I remember one night when everything hit me all at once. For the first time, the frustration, the fear, the exhaustion from pretending I was okay, I broke. I cried until I couldn't breathe. I got so angry. Angry at my body. Angry at doctors who didn't understand. Angry at people who judged what they couldn't see. And yes, if I'm honest, I was angry at God. I said it out loud. God, I can't keep doing this anymore. And I didn't get some dramatic sign from heaven. No lightning, no miracle moment, just stillness. And in that stillness, a truth settled over me that changed everything. Hope isn't a feeling, it's a choice. Something you have to choose. I realized I was waiting to feel hopeful before I kept going. But hope doesn't work like that. Faith doesn't wait for feelings. And hope is a decision you make every day, even through the tears. For me, hope sounds like, I don't understand this, but I won't give up. Today's hard, tomorrow might be better. I'm not healed yet, but that doesn't mean I will never be. God, I don't feel you, but I trust you. Makes me emotional to think about even to this day how dark of a season that was. But in that low moment, I didn't get instant healing, but I got strength. Not the kind you feel in your muscles, but the kind that holds your heart together even when everything else feels broken. I wiped my tears and I stood up slowly. My body didn't change. My symptoms didn't disappear, but something inside me did. I started to choose hope, and I kept choosing it. And I tried every single day. So once the shock wore off, I started to notice how different everything felt. Life didn't pause, like how I said before, because I had a name for what was happening. I still had to get up every day, still had to face the same dizzy spells, the same fatigue, the same you look fine moments. The only thing that I had really changed was how I knew why. And honestly, that made it harder sometimes. Before, I could hope that it was temporary. I could tell myself, maybe it'll go away. But now I knew that it was something I'd have to live with, maybe for the rest of my life. That kind of realization shakes you. It makes you question things you really thought you understood about faith and healing, and especially about God's timing. I remember praying one night asking God why He would finally give me answers if those answers weren't going to bring me healing. It felt cruel in the moment, like being told the truth, but still having to sit in the pain. But over time, I started to see something deeper. God wasn't giving me an ending. He was giving me an understanding. And sometimes about understanding is what prepares you for the endurance. There were days I wanted to be angry, and I was, still am at times, angry that my body couldn't cooperate, angry that I had to miss out on so many things, angry that no one could really fix it. But through that anger, God kept whispering something in my heart. something that doesn't always come with the way we expect it. Sometimes it's not about curing. It's not about curing what's broken, but learning to carry it with grace. Little by little, I started to shift. My prayers changed from, God, please take this away from me, to, God, please help me live through this. That's when I started realizing that faith isn't proven in its easy days. It's proven in the days that you have to choose to trust over understanding. Learning to live with POTS wasn't freeing, it was heavy. But after the diagnosis, people thought I'd finally be relieved. And even though I was for a while, it turned into me trying to be relieved. I tried telling myself that at least now I knew what was wrong with me, but knowing didn't make it any easier. If anything, it made it harder. Now, every time I feel dizzy or faint or weak, I couldn't even tell myself that it would go away soon. I knew better. I knew this wasn't temporary. It wasn't something that I could push through or outgrow. It was my new normal. And that realization broke me more than I expected it to. Every day felt like another reminder that I wasn't the same person anymore. Simple things like standing in a line too long, walking across a store, or even trying to keep up in dance classes all became exhausting. I started to feel even more trapped in my own body. Like, no matter how hard I tried, it would always hold me back. What made it even worse was from the outside, I looked fine. Some days when people told me, "You look great today. You look like you're doing so much better," I'd smile back. Though I could barely stand up upright, inside, I was fighting just to keep from passing out. It felt like no one really understood, and honestly, I didn't expect them to. I started to pull back from people. It was easier to stay home than to explain over and over what POTS even was. Easier to pretend that I was fine. I felt alone, even when I wasn't. Faith didn't come easy then, and I still believe in God, but I didn't always feel Him. I'd pray for strength, but some nights felt like my prayers went unanswered. I remember laying in bed, heart racing for no reason, thinking, how am I supposed to live like this forever? That thought haunted me for such a long time. I wish I could say that I handled it gracefully, but I didn't. I was angry, not just sad or tired, angry. Angry that I finally had answers, but no solution. Angry that God let me go through this, and just to hand me a name for it, like I was supposed to feel better with that. I remember staring at the ceiling one night, whispering through my tears, "Why me? Why now? What's the point of all of this?" People around me reminded me of the truths that God gave us. Like, God has a plan, or you're strong. I wanted to scream because I didn't feel strong. I felt broken. I didn't want a plan. I wanted a break. I think that's the best way I could describe it. It felt unfair that my friends could live normally while I was stuck in a body that betrayed me every day. Some days I didn't even want to pray. I'll just say it. I didn't want to open my Bible. I didn't want to hear another verse about trusting God through the trials. I didn't want to be inspired. I wanted to be heard. I know what y'all are thinking. That was a sharp switch up. Just a few minutes back, I talked about several verses that had helped me in the beginning. But my life, my mental health kept taking such sharp turns. One thing that helped me a week before probably wasn't going to help me in that current week that I was living. Deep down, I think I just wanted to know that God hadn't forgotten about me. And He saw the nights that I cried quietly so no one would hear. That He knew how hard it was to keep showing up, to keep pretending that I was fine even when I wasn't. There was a part of me that still believed He was there because I knew He had to have been there, but I just couldn't feel Him anymore. And that silence hurt so much. Sometimes it outweighed the symptoms. Even though I didn't feel like praying, I still prayed, but it wasn't the same. My words felt small, like whispers that couldn't make it past the ceiling. I knew God was there. I just couldn't feel Him, and I didn't understand why. But now it was like He was quiet too. I didn't stop believing, it just stopped feeling. That scared me more than the illness did at the time because when your body breaks, there's medicine, there's rest and treatments. But when your heart goes numb, it feels like there's nothing anyone can prescribe for that. So at church, I smiled and I raised my hands when songs played, but sometimes I'd catch myself wondering if anyone else felt like me. Standing in a room full of people worshiping, but felt completely unseen. I remembered the saying, God gives His hardest battles to His strongest soldiers. I wanted to believe that, but it didn't feel like a battle. It felt like standing in the middle of the storm that never ends, and I was just surviving. There's a lot of my memories about lying in bed and staring at the ceiling, in all of my feelings and in all of my symptoms, because that's basically all I could have done. That was what my days consisted of, and still do some days, where I can just only lie in bed, only lie at the ceiling, only be trapped with my thoughts. Back then, I started to pull away, not because I stopped caring, but because it hurt too much to pretend that I was okay. People could see the smile, but not the shaking of my hands. They could hear me talk, but not the silent prayers that I whispered in between breaths. There were days I didn't want to get out of bed, not because I was lazy or didn't care, but because it felt like the world had already decided who I was going to be now, the sick one. Every step I took reminded me that my body didn't work the way it used to. Every heartbeat felt like a cruel reminder that something inside me had changed for good. I missed a version of me that I didn't have to think about my symptoms or salt or my heart rate. I missed the me that could just exist without effort. It was strange how grief can come for someone who's still alive. You just start mourning who you were before everything shifted because there was no fixing it. No undoing the diagnosis. No waking up and having it all be a dream. Faith did not feel like it comforted me. It felt like a question that I didn't know how to ask anymore. I wanted to trust that God still had a plan, but it was hard to see anything good in the ache. I didn't want Bible verses or encouragement anymore. I wanted someone to sit in the silence with me and not try to fix it. Because sometimes the silence was the only thing that was left. Y'all, I lived in that state of anger for what it felt like so long, even though it couldn't have been. My memory on the time frame, it really isn't there. It's honestly such a blur, and I did not write down or log in my diary, my digital diary, the time frame. When I was writing, I kind of just kept going. No description, no nothing. I just kept continuing where I left off. But I definitely know I was stuck in that anger and sadness and blur of weakness for so long. After a while, I wasn't angry anymore. It wasn't sadness either. It turned into nothing, like a sort of numbness. I was tired of being sick, tired of pretending, tired of fighting for answers that didn't even fix anything. There's a kind of exhaustion that sleep didn't touch. It lives deeper than that, under your skin, in your chest, and the way you breathe. Honestly, that's where I was. Everything felt heavy, far away, like I was watching my life through thick glass. I remember telling myself repeatedly, we're still figuring things out. I'd even hear those words from those around me, like doctors and others. It was like no one could decide what to do with me, not even myself. I tried medication after medication, each one promising to help, each one coming with its own new list of side effects. One made me dizzy, one made me feel shaky, one made me feel like I kind of was underwater. I never knew what version of myself I was going to get when I woke up, and every doctor had a different theory and a different plan, a different next step. Every time I left the office, new prescription, paper in hand, maybe this was the one that would finally work. And it never really worked, if I'm honest. It would help, but only for so long. Keeping up with the appointments, as in going to them and listening to them and getting my results from them, and then the care afterwards, felt like a full-time job. The waiting rooms smelt the same, sterile, and kind of tired, kind of relaxed my bones a little bit. My calendar filled up with the test dates and the check-ins, follow-ups, like my whole life had been replaced with hospital visits and medication schedules. My friends would ask how I was doing, and I never knew what to say. I'm okay was easier than trying to explain that I didn't know what okay meant anymore. After that, I stopped expecting much from the doctors. I stopped expecting much from myself too. I just went through the motions, took the pills, wrote down symptoms that would show up for the next appointment, sleep and eat and repeat. There were days when I didn't even want to try anymore. Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't have the energy of hoping again. Hope took work, and I didn't have any left to give. Everything around me kept moving. School, friends, and life. But I stayed stuck. It was like being frozen in time while everyone else kept going. I used to think that pain was the worst part, but it wasn't. The numbness was. Because at least when you're in pain, you know you're still alive. That hope I had started to fade away very slowly. Still, again, somewhere in the quiet and the exhaustion, there was a small part of me that refused to let go, completely at least. It didn't shout. I wouldn't even describe it as a whisper. It kind of just waited. It felt like I was waiting for something to change. And for a moment, a light started to break through, but I was still overwhelmed with the feeling of such emptiness. That feeling, that period, that storm of emptiness and numbness where my hope started to fade away, it lasted a while. And I wish I could say I instantly grabbed onto the hope again, but I didn't. In the next episode, we're going to talk about something pretty big, where in my illness, where I started to kind of lose my grip mentally and physically, and where I had to kind of start to take smaller steps. I do want to brace for the next episode. The topic won't be very cheery and might also be a little triggering for some. But God has laid it on my heart to share everything, the good, the bad, the scary, and even the harsh truth of my life and how it is living with such a demanding sickness. In the next episode, I won't forget to give a little heading as a warning that the topic won't be all cheery. I just wanted to thank y'all so much for listening. I pray that y'all are having a good day or a good night, and I'll talk to y'all next time. Bye.